What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I wanted to make another Ninjago video. Now, seeing as a few months ago I made a video where I basically trashed the 3 newest Ninjago seasons, I thought I'd make another video trashing Ninjago because that's what I do. No, I'm kidding. I love Ninjago. I love the original 10 seasons. I feel like now it's starting to become really retready and boring, and it kind of makes me sad how bad the new seasons of Ninjago are. But the original 10, seasons 1 through 10, that includes the pilots, are probably my favorite TV show ever. And that's fitting because they renamed it. They renamed it Ninjago, not Masters of Spinjitzu, as it was originally called. So technically it is its own show, so I'm glad that there's that differentiation involved. But I wanted to talk about something that I've never really seen anyone talk about, and that is the character of Zane and the changes that he undergoes throughout the show, because you're probably thinking by the title of this video, what does that mean? How can Zane be Ninjago's greatest mistake while also being its greatest character? Allow me to explain. During the first 3 seasons of the show, I feel Zane is hands down the most fascinating character. When they actually go deep and explore him, it's fascinating. The relationship with his father, the just whole dynamic of his character, the idea that he's like the robot character, like the discovery of him being a robot is really emotional, and just kind of all the elements to his character make him really fascinating. Brent Miller, who does have a YouTube channel on YouTube, voices Zane, and I feel like he's fantastic. He brings like a certain amount of life to the character that I feel like no one else really could. Even Kirby Morrow himself, the voice of Cole, passed away last year. In an interview with Brent Miller, said that there's no one else who could have captured that character as well as him, and I would have to agree. Just everything about his character is really fascinating, and they even talk about that at the end of Season 3, is the fact that despite him being a robot, he was almost the most human character, and the way they explore him and his relationships to other characters, through the first couple seasons, it seemed like at first he was going to be, just kind of a boring character, but then, like, in the second episode of Season 1, I believe, they actually explore him, and he goes off in search of the Falcon, and then, the team kind of thinks he's a weirdo, but then they all come to respect him at the end of that episode. And then later on, a couple episodes later, they really explore him and have him discover he's a robot. They have that whole revelation and his past with his father and the score and his past. It's just super emotional and really well done. And then throughout then, Zane just always has this kind of inner conflict about, who he really is, and, like, does he have a place with the ninja? And they always just do such fascinating things with his character. And I feel like the way that his character went out at the end of Season 3 was the appropriate way for his character to end. The character, the member of the team that was the robot, who was kind of dismissed at first, ended up being the most important of them all and the most human, the one with a soul. And, he just sacrifices himself for his friends. I feel like that's great. Where the problem comes in is the fact that after that point, they literally do nothing, zip, with his character after that point. And I mean it. He has no development past Season 3 onwards. I get it. It's a kid's show. They had to resurrect him. But the way that he gets resurrected doesn't even make any sense, and I've never seen anyone talk about this. The fact is, they make a really big deal in Season 3 about how, because the main plot of that season is that the villain basically replicated Zane and created all these different models, but they always talk about how Zane is unique and different, and how there's no possible way to replicate his model because he's so unique. And, like, I guess the idea is, that he is kind of like a human, but like, it's kind of like the replicants, I guess, from Blade Runner, if you want to look that deep into it, how the replicants are kind of like almost more human than real people. Like, there's always kind of that mysticism to it, but I'm getting off topic. The fact is that it doesn't make any sense how he managed to be rebuilt. Like, they at the end of the season, you hear his voice talking to Pixel, his like robot girlfriend, basically, if you don't know who that character is. And then you see a bunch of machinery working in the factory or whatever, and he says, "Are we compatible now?" which is a reference to earlier in the season where she said they weren't compatible or whatever. And it's implying that he's reconstructing himself. And that would make sense to me, because if, of all people, he would probably be the only one that would know how to rebuild himself. He saw the blueprints that his father made for him and all that. But, like, they made such a big deal out of how unique he was. Now no one could replicate him. And the fact that he, like, was able to be reconstructed in, like, whatever, the silver robot form feels really weird. And even Brent Miller himself said he doesn't even like the silver Zane as much as the original one. And I have to agree with that. It just feels weird. They put a weird effect on his voice and stuff, and I don't know, I didn't really love that. I kind of preferred him when you could just hear Brent Miller's unfiltered, excellent voice acting. But that's, like, once again, just kind of off topic. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I get that he rebuilt himself, but how did he end up on the island? Because it's implied that he rebuilds himself, but then the next season picks up, like, a couple months in the future, and the ninjas still think he's dead, and they're all broken up about it. And I like that they show the impact that Zane's passing had on all of them, but at the same time, like, what happened to him? Like, I heard that Ronan, or whatever, the bounty hunter type character, was basically the one who kidnapped him and gave him to Master Chen or whatever, but, like, when did that happen? Like, Zane rebuilt himself and then immediately got kidnapped. Like, why was he never able to get in contact with the ninja again? Like, it just never made any sense to me. That whole freaking element with Zane and how he was reconstructed. And, like, he has, like, a really unique power source or whatever. Like, he has, like, this kind of heart. Like, he basically has, like, a heart. And they never explain, like, how they were able to replicate that. Like, because he literally blew up. So how would he be able to, like, did he rebuild himself with the new Ninjago design? But then in later seasons, you see that he still has that same heart mechanism. So I don't know how they replicated that. Earlier in the season, when they shut off the power, Zane gives half of his heart to Pixel. So perhaps she gave him back that part of himself or whatever. But later on in the series, he has, like, the full heart again. So I don't even understand that. But just kind of, that's just, like, a superficial element. Like, I could ignore all the logistical elements as to how he was rebuilt and how he came back, as long as they did something interesting with him. But they never do. They never do anything interesting with him. They try to give him a character arc in season 4, but they don't really. Like, he keeps having these nightmares or visions about an ice dragon. Like, he has, like, amnesia. Like, he doesn't remember who he is, which was never explained. And then Pixel becomes Jarvis from Iron Man and then is, like, in his head talking to him. And so he keeps having these, like, visions or something of an ice dragon, and he's afraid of it. And then eventually he's able to, like, and it's actually not real. It's just within himself. It's, like, the manifestation of his own fear. And then he has to conquer that, and then he's like, I am the titanium ninja. It's like, yeah, dude, we knew that. Like, it's just, like, Zane relearning who he is, which isn't really that interesting. Like, throughout season 4, we basically just watched Zane become who he was before he died and came back. So it's, like, the same. It's not, like, he doesn't grow at all as a character there. It's not really, like, anything. And, like, conquering your fear or whatever, that, like, theme isn't something exclusive to Zane's character. The interesting thing about him before was that they were playing around with elements that were exclusive to his character because of his because of the fact that he's a robot and all that, right? And then they never do anything with him. Like, so, and then season 5, he gets nothing. He's just a glorified robot joke, and he keeps malfunctioning. Then season 6, he decides to be a dumbass and tries to take on Nauticon the Djinn in a game of chess, which he knows he can't beat him in logistically, but just decides to anyway, and then of course he gets kidnapped. So he basically disappears for the entirety of season 6. And then season 7, he's just, once again, malfunctioning. They pull the same gag they pulled in season 5. He's just a robot joke. Then when they released the movie, I know this isn't really a valid comparison, but he was also just kind of a robot joke in the movie. He wasn't really a character at all. None of the ninjas in the movie, except for Lloyd, were actually characters, which is fine because we have the show for all of their development. That's kind of off topic. Then season 8 is kind of where they do something interesting with him. They actually did something with his character again. They give him a flashback that kind of deepens the backstory of his character, where it's revealed that the Master of Ice or something basically came to visit him and he was sick, and that somehow he passed his elemental powers to Zane, basically, which is actually a really interesting concept. So that's cool, and it adds like an element of backstory because it's like Wu actually met him before we see Wu meet him in the pilots, in that kind of gag where he's like meditating underwater and then Wu's there. So there's actually a little bit more backstory to that they actually met beforehand, which is really cool. But then he doesn't really get any development after that. He gets beaten up by this character who's a part of the biker gang, the Sons of Garmadon, Mr. E. And in an original cut, this is on Brent Miller's channel if you want to see this. They have like an unfinished animatic of this idea. In season 6 of Ninjago, the season with the djinn that I just talked about, Jay and Nia end up taking refuge in Zane's dad's lighthouse where he was imprisoned. And when they are there, they discovered that there's this basically not prototype, but replacement Zane, who's like this rusty old robot, and he's called Echo Zane. And he was like Dr. Julian's, Zane's dad's replacement of Zane while he was living there. And he ends up helping them out, but then at the end of season 6, all the ninjas' memories except Jay and Nia's memories get erased because they reverse time. And it's weird that Jay and Nia never go back to look for Echo Zane, but that's besides the point. They were going to have kind of an interesting story about how the Sons of Garmadon basically found Echo Zane somehow, because there's this big twist in season 8 where Zane's fighting this Mr. E guy, and then there's this huge cliffhanger at the end of one of the episodes where it's revealed that he's a ninjroid like Zane. And I remember watching them being like, what are they going to do next? And they do nothing. Nothing happens with that character. They never did anything with him. So then Zane gets the crap beaten out of him by this Mr. E guy, and then he goes back to having no role at all and being a non-existent character. He just spouts technological dialogue, and there's a few robot jokes, and once again, he is a useless character. In season 10, I actually think they did a good job of balancing most of the characters' roles to the point where they had kind of an important role. Like, Jay and Nia have their whole plot element in March of the Oni where Jay is going to propose to her, and then Lloyd is the only one who can enter the fog or whatever, and then Cole has his whole plot line, which ultimately doesn't benefit his character. It only benefits Garmadon's character's development. And Kai has the role of reforging the golden weapon. So they do a good job of giving all the characters some sort of role in season 10. Except Zane. He does literally nothing. And they actually give Pixel more of a role because she has to stay behind to pull Lloyd and Garmadon out of the city when they need her to. So they actually gave Zane's girlfriend more of a role in season 10 than he had. And it's just so lame that they never did anything with the Mr. E plotline, because it could have been cool to have this kind of element of how, Zane was the original, he was so unique, and that, he actually was replicated, and this character that we saw before as being kind of weak or whatever, and that most of the audience probably forgot about, actually comes back, and then, it actually adds like a level of emotion to the fact that he feels betrayed, the fact that he was left behind on this island and no one came back to look for him, and that he maybe remembers what happened even though no one else does. And the Sons of Garmadon, they came looking for him and they remembered him, so he trusts them more. There could have been some really emotional stuff there, and then he and Zane have like a conflict, right? And that now he is the superior Zane. Like, they could have actually had Zane have a bit of like an internal conundrum going on in that season, but they never did anything with it. Like, that's not a knock against seasons 8 and 9, because they are my favorite seasons of the show, at least Masters of Spinjitzu, not including seasons 11 through 15, which I think were pretty bad. But, you know, they just did nothing with his character, and it's so disappointing. Like, the fact that they did nothing with him. Like, people say that they didn't do a lot with Cole. I think Cole actually had a really good character arc throughout seasons 8 and 9, caring for baby Master Wu, and even Kai has a lot of great seasons. Like, he has a great character arc in season 4, and Nia has a lot of great development, Nia and Jay both, in season 6, and, well, season 7 was a disaster, but we're not going to talk about that one. And, like, even Wu gets some development, you know, like, they give all these characters a lot of development. Except Zane. Zane, like, he gets nothing to do. He never does anything past when he dies and comes back. And it would have been kind of like, you know, like, I always complain about this, about how, you know, oh, when someone dies in Marvel or something, there's like a different version of the same character that comes to replace him. What I think would have been a good idea is if they killed off Zane in season 3, he's actually dead. And then later on in season 6, they find Echo Zane, and then instead of just forgetting about him altogether, they go back for him, and then they just bring him and get him to be part of the team, like, not as a replacement for Zane, but in memory of their old comrade. You know, I think that would have been good, and it would have been like, they didn't kill off the character necessarily, even though they did, but they still, like, left it for a little while. Like it was a couple seasons with, like, before they actually brought him back, because he didn't do anything substantial in any of the seasons really following, you know, his death. Like, he could have been replaced by any other character. The only thing that I struggle with is how the narrative of season 4 would have played out differently, because of the fact that the entire motive for them taking part in the Tournament of Elements, or, like, orchestrated by Master Chen, was because he enticed them by teasing them that he had Zane. So I don't know how they would have executed that differently, or how that would have worked, but I feel like it would have been better if they just left it for a little while, they let it breathe, and then eventually they brought in Echo Zane, and he came in as kind of, you know, the new Zane, you know? It's like, it's not the same, but Zane is still back in some form. You know, I think that would have been really good. Like, they did that in Star Trek, is like, they had Data, and then they had B4, who was like Data's brother, but he was basically like just like Data. And then there's like a part at the end of, I believe it's Star Trek Voyager or something. I don't know, I'm not huge into Star Trek, but at the end of one of those movies, Data ends up sacrificing himself, and then B4 at the end ends up, like, kind of singing a song that Data used to sing or something. And then it's kind of like, you know, he's still around in some form. Like, his soul, his spirit is still there. And I feel like that's what they should have done with Zane and Echo Zane. But they didn't. They just had Zane stick around, which I guess was fine, but actually, no, it's not, because he never does anything. And that's just weird, because you're going to be like, oh, it's a kid's show, blah, blah, blah. They killed off tons of characters in this show, especially towards the end with Harumi and Mistake, and, like, there's countless characters that they kill off that don't come back. And the fact that, you know, you have friggin' Zane here, and he never does anything after his death. Like, yeah, I would say that Zane is the most interesting character, because he's the most different in terms of his development in the first 3 seasons. You know, a lot of them kind of are similar, like, they've got parents that are still around, and they have to heal some bond with their parents, but there's always that interesting element to Zane where it's like, he doesn't have that, so he has to find his own closure, and he has to, like, you know, figure all this out on his own, you know, and he has such a different dynamic than all the other characters, and he's, I think, the best character in the show for the first 3 seasons, and then it just went off the rails from there. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I just wanted to talk about how disappointing it is that they did literally nothing with Zane's character. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I just haven't seen a lot of people touch on this topic, and I wanted to talk about it myself, because I love Ninjago. The original 10 seasons, I love. Well, season 7 is pretty bad, but every other season has elements that I love to it. And I just feel like it's so disappointing that Zane just got no character. He's basically the equivalent of Echo from Star Wars The Clone Wars and The Bad Batch, where he dies in season 3, and then they bring him back, and then he does nothing. It's like, that's actually the same, like, that's weird. Echo and Zane, Echo Zane, whoa, I just found a weird parallel. But it's basically the equivalent of Echo from Star Wars, where they kill him off in Clone Wars, he comes back, only to do technological things and not do anything, and has, like, no character. It's like, he should have just died. Like, he should have stayed. Like, I know that it's a kid's show, I know that, you know, Ninjago's a kid's show, but it's a show that shows a lot of maturity, especially towards the end, and even in the original few seasons, it shows a lot of emotional maturity, and it's a really fascinating story, and I feel like it's just, Zane's whole character always stuck out to me like a sore thumb. Like, the fact that he's just always sitting around after season 3, and I was just constantly wondering, like, when are they going to do anything with him? And then they almost did, but then they just decided not to. Like, I have no idea on earth why they cut out that whole plot line. I know they had a lot going on with seasons 8 and 9 and 10 towards the end, but, like, why on earth did they cut out the only thing that could have potentially deepened Zane's character following his death? I have no idea. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I know that this year I've made a lot of Ninjago videos complaining. I mean, the last Ninjago video I did was praising the video game, so perhaps that's not true, but I've talked about Ninjago in the past and how much I love it. I love the original 10 seasons. It's just seasons 11, 12, and 13 that I hate, but of those original 10 seasons that I love so dearly, this is the cardinal sin, is the fact that Zane is so criminally underused following season 3. But yeah, you guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you agree that Zane is super underused? Do you think they could have written him differently? Do you think that perhaps they could have done something like what I suggested by having Echo Zane show up and fill the shoes of Zane? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Bye.